Hello. So this presentation is going to be about cyber warfare between the United States and Russia, which is mainly be focused on Russian involvement and US involvement in each of the country's civilian infrastructure. So this will be part of the course for the information cyber warfare course, and this is presented to you by TRN Arpiris and KVS Sachinta. To get started, what is cyber warfare? Simply, cyber warfare is the use of digital attacks, such as malware or viruses, or even implanted espionage experts by one country to disrupt the critical infrastructure of another. So critical infrastructure means healthcare, power, fire control, disease control, features that are critical to another country's and civilians' well-being. So it uses hackers instead of soldiers. It uses malicious code or viruses instead of guns and bombs. To move on to the next slide, cyber attacks between the United States and Russia, we will be categorizing and focusing on 4 main attacks, and each of these attacks will contain multiple incidents. And to begin with, Edward Snowden's leaks. So Edward Snowden leaked highly classified information while he was working at the NSA. And to begin, who is Edward Snowden? Snowden is an American who worked in the National Secret Agency at first, and then disclosed highly classified information and publicized it basically, and now he is residing in Russia. He was a former employee of NSA, and he fled the United States and eventually made a documentary about the spying of American citizens that was actively happening at the time. So the damage that was done by Snowden, and you can see here that the Central Intelligence Agency and the National Security Agency, as well as the National Reconnaissance Office in the United States, had spent more than $30 billion in closing this in damage control. So to quote Snowden, "I carefully evaluated every single document I disclosed to ensure that each was legitimately in the public interest. There are all sorts of documents that would have made a big impact that I didn't turn over." So what he basically says is that he only disclosed information or documents that the CIA and the NSA had that were in the public interest. So like the massive spying on US citizens, things like that. And the second incident, Russian interference in the 2016 United States elections, which got some major controversy and public attention when Donald Trump won the election in 2016. So one of the incidents is that the Internet Research Agency, which was based in St. Petersburg, created a significant number of social media accounts and used them to harm the campaign of Hillary Clinton. And by doing that, they were essentially boosting the campaign of Donald Trump while they were acting as legitimate radical political groups. This happened in September 2016. And another incident, Russian military agencies had spent spear phishing emails. So they targeted more than 300 volunteer employees and individuals of the Clinton's campaign. And that happened in March of 2016. And another incident in the presidential campaign, John Podesta, chairman of Hillary Clinton's special presidential campaign, received a phishing email saying him to change his password through a link. This hack allowed Russians to access more than 60,000 emails from that account. So this was a successful attack, and that happened in March 2016. And because of these attacks and these attacks on the campaign, basically Clinton lost. and Donald Trump eventually won. The third incident is the Russian attacks on United States power grids. So the United States power grid has been the subject of certain attacks in 2016. For example, a sponsored Russian group, they tried to hack the American utilities via a compromised email account of a contractor. And that was reported by the Wall Street Journal. So instead of attacking high-value targets directly, what they do is they attack and they target a lower individual of a company and then pivot through that individual to higher partners, and then use simple tactics like phishing. Basically, you hack the human and they try to compromise the relationship between the pivot point and the target. So in summary, these attackers, they start with a basic attack on a esoteric website and use that to gain some footfall to work their way to access the most critical infrastructure. And basically they targeted affiliate Department of Defense contractor sites, and through that they gained access to the Department of Defense mainframes, and once they're inside, they can actually exploit. They have more control and they can actually run more exploit code and get critical access to critical infrastructure. Okay, so what are the outcomes? So if hackers are able to compromise the US power grid, they can potentially cause long-term power outages. Now, the extent of their access is not exactly known, so they could be even in redundant power storage areas as well. So when taking out power, they could completely cause a blackout, causing even the backup power to simply not come up, and that means more than lights go out, right? Large-scale outage could be devastating for emergency services, hospitals, power plants, water treatment, and many more essential services, and even traffic. And it would cause chaos and would erupt when ordinary people suffer outages in their homes. And the fourth and final attack, US attacks on Russian power grids. So the New York Times posted a story that talks about implants. Basically placement of malware in the networks involved in managing Russian power grid that could be activated remotely in the case of a major conflict between the two powers. So how to mitigate cyber warfare? Basically, the understanding must be formed between the nations that engage in cyber warfare to improve their long-term relationships and coordinate between those things. And they need to identify the threats, they beware of cybercrimes, keep an eye out for employees, use multi-factor authentication, conduct audits on a regular basis, protect important data, carry out risk assessments, have in-depth knowledge about risk factors, prepare for the worst-case scenario. And above all, the one point that is not in the slide is education. People need to be educated to not fall into traps of phishing emails or targeted phishing. They need to understand, they need to know the difference between a legitimate email and a fake or a phony email. So thank you. This is the end of the presentation.